This is the TriggerTech Ace trigger for the Glock. Now, I say for the Glock because this works on basically every single 9mm and 40 Smith & Wesson Glock. There are some modifications you have to do for Gen 5, but we'll get into that. But this trigger is truly incredible. When TriggerTech says they made a substantial leap in the technology of the Glock trigger, they are not kidding. I can't imagine a Glock trigger better than this. It is truly remarkable. But that's not to say that it doesn't come with some downsides, and we'll get into that. So, first, let's talk about the trigger itself. The trigger itself is very, very easy to install. It comes with a trigger shoe. So this bit, it comes with the internal trigger bar and the little housing piece that goes into the frame. It also comes with a rear plate. This is necessary. You have to install this. Now this works on every single 9mm and 40 Smith & Wesson Gen 1 to 5. There is a little thing you have to remove for the Gen 5 specifically. There is a small tab on the frame. If you want to install this, I'm not going to do an installation because there are a million install videos on YouTube, and this is exactly the same. I believe TriggerTech did one of their own, and they will show which tab it is to remove. This Glock here is a Gen 2 Glock 24, so 40 Smith & Wesson. It does come with different springs, so you can choose which weight of spring that you would like. And it comes with the standard TriggerTech things, which is a little Velcro strap, and this is a punch to help you install all of the little bits, very subtly branded as well. This is my older TriggerTech, or not TriggerTech, sorry, this is my old Glock trigger. It's a stay stock rear trigger with a Killer Instinct Velocity shoe. So with that out of the way, let's get into the actual trigger itself. The trigger is unbelievably crisp. There is basically no play whatsoever. So let's do a few trigger pulls so you can see exactly what's going on. Now, as I'm pulling through the trigger, that's it. That's all there is to it. There is no mush to be had on the reset. It is very light, and then you pull the trigger again and you're good. And with that, we get to the first trade-off. Now, I don't know if this is just specific to my Gen 2 Glock 24 or if it's specific to others, but the reset of the trigger is barely perceptible. So what do I mean by that? I'm going to slowly let my finger off of the trigger, and you will see that there is no defining wall right there. I guarantee you the microphone did not pick that up. That was the trigger breaking. That I can now pull again. That is how imperceptible it is. And if you're dry firing this, you're going to be thinking, oh, that's not very good. But under live fire shooting, because the reset of the trigger in terms of the overall distance is quite short, you don't actually need a very perceptible reset. I know that sounds weird. And I know to a lot of people this is going to be a step too far in a Glock trigger. But if you are actually considering this trigger, you will have to get used to its quirks and to the slightly different manual of arms. Instead of hunting for that trigger reset like you would on a normal Glock trigger or on like many other triggers in the world, you're essentially just going to be letting it go forward to the point where it stops moving forward. Keep your finger on the trigger shoe and pull back as soon as it goes all the way forward. Now you might be thinking, well, how do I know if it's gone all the way forward? Well, it's pretty obvious while you're live firing. As soon as you pull the trigger and you reset it, you do feel it move forward. You just don't feel the click, and you don't hear an audible click. Of course, under live fire, you're probably not going to hear an audible click. But just because you don't feel the click of it resetting doesn't mean you don't feel the trigger moving forward. So it's an adjustment in how you use a Glock trigger, one that some people are going to be perfectly fine with and one that some aren't, but it's something that everyone who's interested in this trigger should know about. Now, the other thing has to do with the safety. Now, Glocks are famous for not having a manual safety, except for that one military prototype or something, I think. But instead, they have a trigger shoe safety where you cannot pull the trigger unless the trigger shoe is depressed, therefore it allows it to move back. This is very dependent on your gun. This is a Gen 2 Glock frame, a completely unmodified Glock frame. Yes, there is work done on the slide, but that has nothing to do with the safety. The safety, the way it's supposed to work, is if you can see there is a little notch on the back of the trigger shoe. That notch is supposed to interface with the frame, which prevents it from firing when you don't want it to. But there's a problem. And again, I want to stress, this might just be for Gen 2 Glocks. I don't know because I only have a Gen 2 Glock. Because of Canada's stupid laws, I can't get a different generation of Glock. But let me show you what happens. If you pull at the bottom of the trigger, of course, it's going to clear the little post, and you're going to get a trigger pull. And in theory, if I push from the very top, it shouldn't fire, right? Except it fires. And the reason for that is I think the Gen 2 frame, again, completely unmodified frame, is slightly different, and the bar doesn't really connect with the frame, no matter where you're placing your finger on it. Now, it's not to say it won't ever connect with it. It can, but in order for the bar to connect with it, you have to press so far up onto the trigger that your finger literally can't even do that. I'm talking the very top millimeter, like half a millimeter. And when you're using your finger, even if your finger is right up to the top of the slide, you're still going to be pulling that trigger. So for all intents and purposes, this gun has no safety. And this trigger is advertised for a few things: duty use, competition use. Now, the different springs that they have in here, they advertise for different. So they have like one heavier spring that is supposed to be for duty use and one lighter spring that's supposed to be for competition use. Even with the duty spring in here, yes, you're going to have a harder and a more difficult trigger to pull, but without any safety mechanism on this specific frame, I would never in a million years install this in anything that is I'm carrying for duty use or everyday use or anything like that. Not that I can in Canada, but I suspect this video is going to be more for my international audience considering Canada's handgun situation. Which means that this trigger is a competition-only trigger. And depending on the rules of your competition, of whatever in, if they require a safety of some variety, while this technically has one, if you have a really stringent RO, they might not let you use it. So while I don't think that's going to affect too many people, I do think it could affect some, and it might also completely turn them off from the product. Now let's get into the last negative relating to this product, and that has to do with compatibility. Now this is compatible with any of the 9 or 40 Smith & Wesson Glocks, right? They even specifically called out the Glock 24, which is very rarely done, so thank you TriggerTech for doing that. But it means that conversion kits like this, which is a 22LR training kit, so you just take the slide off, put this on, and now you have a training version of your handgun, is not compatible with it because you need to use this back piece here. Now, this doesn't just apply to 22LR slides. This also applies to any slide that fits on your gun. Because it requires this little piece at the back, you can't just take off one slide, put on another, and be good to go. You have to remove this back piece. And this back piece isn't very difficult to remove, but it is another thing you have to do. So if you're keeping your different slides, let's say you have a 17L slide and you have a 17 slide, which are very different in length, as you can see, and you want to switch it up at the range, you're going to have to remove the back panel every time that you want to swap the frame or the slide on your gun, rather. Normally, that can just be done by pulling back, pulling down the tabs, slide off, slide on, right? Can't do that with this one. It's not a huge downside, but it is an extra thing you need to do, and one that some people are going to be a bit annoyed about. But I return to what I started with, and that is that this trigger is a revolutionary jump in the Glock trigger. It genuinely feels incredible. It is so crisp. It is so it genuinely changes the way the handgun feels. This does not feel like a Glock trigger in the slightest. Its closest comparison, dare I say, from what I have felt, is a 1911. Now, it's not as good as a 1911. Do not get it twisted, right? The reset isn't as good, but it is as close to a 1911 as I think a Glock can possibly get. And I do genuinely think I got a bit more accuracy out of this Glock than I would with my standard trigger. As much as I try and train out my flinching and my recoil counter movements, sometimes I miss it. Sometimes I pull one to the south or to the north or whatever. I feel like that happened a lot less when I was using this. It was much easier to just get it on target, shot down range, and get going to the next target. It felt like I was always going to hit my target because it was such a sharp, crisp break. So who is this trigger for? Well, in my opinion, in my testing, this is a trigger for people who want to use their handgun at the range only. With the safety issues that I experienced on mine, I just cannot recommend this trigger for anyone who's using it for duty or carry purposes. It's just not safe enough from my perspective. But for range use where everything is pretty tightly controlled, this is an outstanding trigger, a genuine leap in technology, and I'd be very interested to see TriggerTech bring this trigger to different handguns in the future. Now, I don't think 1911s need it, but maybe we can look at some other stuff that is striker fired. Although I will say that's probably not their main goal, considering that TriggerTech is a Canadian company and they can't even sell to their own populace right now, besides the people that already own them. But that is it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. There are more rifle and shotgun videos to come. This is kind of an interlude week of a handgun thing that I know probably most of you can't buy or do anything with, but still, it was a very interesting product that I wanted to check out. So, that is it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and have a good day.